Hey, beautiful family. So, somebody wrote me today and asked me to make a video, and I decided to make it because the topic at hand, it seemed like this person was quite confused about the way I perceive things, and they were basically asking me to establish how I can believe in a loving God when bad things are happening. And I've spoke about this before, of course, in the past, but I think it's always a fascinating topic. So, the reason I found it poignant and I wanted to make a video today, yesterday morning I had a synchronicity surrounding the Cathars, and unbeknown to myself, yesterday was also the 700th anniversary of the massacre of the Cathars in France, the last stronghold of the Cathar Gnostic community. Now, if you don't know who the Cathars were, basically they had slightly different beliefs, but they believed in the core message of Jesus Christ. They believed in loving and caring, etc. But what they also believed was that there were two gods, and there was an evil god and a good god. And creation is a mixture of both of those gods, and the good god does not have any evil in them. The good God does not have any malice in them. The good God is a creating force that would create beautiful flowers. The bad God is the creating force that would create a venomous snake. And you have this mixture going on, but they are separate entities. They believe that the majority was celibate. They had quite strict beliefs on that, and they thought incarnating people into this reality was not right, because the goal was to leave this reality and go back to the good God, the true creator, instead of being caught in the bondage of matter. The good God is in the bondage of light. So you are heavy and dense here, unless you do work to lighten yourself, as we all know. So they had this peculiar belief system, and actually the Catholic Church didn't stand for them. They were celibate, they were vegetarian, but they were good people, they were loving people, they were caring, high vibrational people. And the Catholic Church did a deeply unchristian thing and burned them alive. And yesterday was, I forget the name of the massacre, I'll put it in, yesterday was the anniversary, and I had a synchronicity on the morning about Cathars, and I hadn't thought about Cathars in a long time. For all I've studied about them, etc. in the past, and I knew about their ways. And then later on the night I found out it was the 700th anniversary, and this ties in a little bit to the video. So, first of all, this person was saying that during the Holocaust there was a rabbi who knelt and prayed before they were going to be executed, and that God would intervene, and nothing happened, and of course they were killed. And he shouted, "There is no God," before he died. And of course, anyone's faith can be tested in the panic of a situation like that. But this rabbi shouted it, and the person referenced and said, "I'm sure that people who are raped," for example, was the example he gave, they say, "Please God, no," and still nothing happens. So I'll get onto the Cathars momentarily, but if you take a traditional viewpoint, you can look at the teachings of Jesus, and he says very clearly, the prince of this world is Satan. And we all know Lucifer is said to be the angel created by God, and he wanted to be God himself, and was cast down to earth. Then humanity created Satan, because Lucifer tempted them. Humanity agreed to it, because we are weak, and in doing so, that exchange of energy creates the Satan that we know, the tempter, the evil force. Now, another important factor there is that you are, when connecting to that force and expressing a beautiful gift, which is free will. If there were no free will, what would be the point in your life? If you could only do what was predetermined by an external force you'd be like a computer program, a robot. And we are not like that. But many are like that because they are addicted to the media, they're addicted to drugs, and their biology is like a computer, and it's programmed by these behaviors to express as a computer program habitually would. Those of us who get free from that programming, we can create things totally unexpected. We can create things that come from original manifestation. But most people never escape that computer program, sadly. So the idea in that sense is that Lucifer is using his power to corrupt this world. And so what would be a good human being with some moral governance in their heart has fallen. And so the moral governance of love and light and caring is eroded away by the energy of Lucifer acting as Satan inside the human consciousness. And that exchange where the only power Lucifer has over anybody is temptation. The agreement to the temptation is the creation of Satan. So the only power Satan has over us is temptation. But he does have another power, because even if you're disciplined, the other person can be descended into a primitive behavior. This is the fruits of the spirit, which are jovial and loving and kind, and the fruits of the flesh are the things that express trauma and tragedy against people, which is unjust. So that's an important factor, is free will. And then you ask, why is the evil here? The evil is here because of the rebellion of something, Lucifer to sin. But when you look at the Cathars story, which is interesting, they have a view that man is pure and man is holy. And here on earth, just as you have a loving animal and a venomous animal who's not that loving and not that divine, you have that same occurrence inside man, because this loving God and this evil God have both come together in the creation of this reality. And the purely loving and light reality aspects of being dragged down into the physical reality that this evil God created. Now I have some experience, and I've wondered in the past, because I've had dogs save my life from a venomous... I've had a dog called B. She saved my life from a venomous snake. And I wondered and pondered about these things, because before, whilst in the children's home years ago, I heard a voice say, Satan has entered your home. And a new lady had started working, and the poor woman, I was getting ready to dismiss her. I thought, what's going on here? And I went outside, and it's on video. I, again, was nearly bitten by Africa's deadliest snake, and 5 of my dogs ran barking ahead of me and saved me from this snake. So we're going back to collect Christina. Need to go and see how she is.
Asha! 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 Asha!
Ngoja nimkate shika hapo.
Wait. Wait.
Ngoja nimkate.
Subiri. Get the dogs away. Get the dogs away.
Ngoja nimkate.
I'm just about to go to the hospital with a sick child, and my dogs... I went to the car to get something, and my dog... Happy! Acha! And my dogs went crazy as I got close to this area, and it's because there's a puff adder here. Okay. What do we do? Kubwa.
Kubwa sana.
Kubwa sana.
Inatosha hii. Inatosha hii moja tu.
So...
And I've said often, you have good angles and bad angles of light driving the vehicles here. And you have good creation and bad creation off the back of that. You have angels that are messengers of light. Photons traveling on angles of light can go into a dog and they can protect you. Photons traveling on a negative angle of light can go into a snake and they can be attacking you and kill you even. So this is the spiritual side of that. When you look at the Cathar side of it, it almost starts to make a little more sense, because if this reality was purely just created by one loving God, the loving God I know is hell-bent on ending the suffering of persons and children here. Absolutely, undeniably just set on ending that suffering. But when I go out in nature And that includes dogs. I've had God guide me to help dogs very often, very, very often. I've had prayers answered around them, etc. When you go out into nature and you watch a baby antelope, for example, being eaten from the back end up by a baboon, ripping pieces off with its hand. It's alive right up to the very end, and it's a baby. And it's gruesome, and it's vile, and it's horrible. And as you look at it, you say, how can the loving God I know want that? How can that be part of his creation? How can he participate in this? And when you get to those very impossible to answer questions about God, leaning towards the Cathar idea actually gives a much more comfortable state of being, in all honesty, because you have this beautiful loving God who is guiding us, and you reach that God by being in a light state. Anyone who says they have sought God without fasting, you haven't sought God. Every spiritual teacher told you to fast, and I don't mean just eating one meal. I've ate one meal a day since I was 27 years old, and I'm now 36 in a few weeks. I've always ate one meal a day, because if I don't, I feel heavy. Even when I was running, I was exactly the same. Fasting is cutting calories. It really is cutting calories. You can do it on juice, reducing calories as well, of course. But what it does is it starts disconnecting you from your flesh. And when it starts disconnecting you from your flesh, it allows you to elevate your vibration. And just as God is on a FM signal, there are flies here, then this world is on an AM. You can't keep operating in the AM signal of, if you're using a radio, I hope you understand what I mean. You can't keep operating in the AM and expect to hear FM. You've got to turn up the dial. You've got to do something. And what you have to do is elevate your vibration, your consciousness, your frequency to be able to speak to that true God. And when you see people who are extremely gluttonous, etc., they are more, in my experience, prone to feeling in the lower vibrations, more prone to anger, more prone to depression and so on, because there is a heaviness overcoming them. It's not always the case, but it is very often the case here in my life, that the more we embark on the lower vibratory things like alcohol and gluttony and so on, the more we express the fruits of the flesh and not the fruits of the spirit. So why is God allowing this evil? Well, number one, either because God is a genuine loving father and Lucifer is a child of theirs, and they are here messing things up. We have free will, and it's a beautiful gift, and we need it or life would be pointless. And unfortunately, with that free will, God's only way to operate on this planet is through our hands and feet. God does not suspend the laws here. You can be the most loving, godly, fasting, praying person that ever did walk the world, and you might get attacked. Saint Seraphim of Sarov, he was a deeply ascetic man. He was constantly praying and fasting and seeking God, and then all of a sudden thieves came and beat him senseless and really hurt him. He then spent 1,000 days in prayer on a rock to tackle this, to forgive these people and overcome it. He was a good human. As many of the saints were martyred, as many of the saints got sick. There's an opposing force that doesn't want that high vibration here. And when you can start seeing it that way, you begin to see that perhaps it is the corrosion of other human beings, and the laws of reality state that there is a physical law. So I might be a good person, but if God has infected another person with enough evil and low vibration and enough hurt and pain often, and enough lack of forgiveness which forms into rebellion, that person might well come and kill me. And if I am not in a good space to hear God's guidance on that particular day, maybe I'm having a bad day, maybe I'm not feeling light, maybe I ate too much, maybe I'm too busy watching a computer screen, then that person may well get to me. Recently, a few years ago, my dog Johnicky saved me. Intruders climbed up onto the top floor of the house I was sitting in. The video's on YouTube. My dog was sleeping on the bed. I had headphones on looking at a screen. It was dark outside. There was no way I was going to see these people coming. They would have came from here, and I was at this angle. and no doubt they would have probably hit me with a machete or something. And it was Johnicki, my dog, who woke up, and she ran round the corner and she tore into whatever was there, and I didn't know it was people. I really didn't know until the next day when I found out the neighbour's house had been ransacked and robbed. So I have fell victim to illness, and I know it's not God that's doing it to me. God wants me to be well, because the true loving God wants me to be well. So I have a juggle. There's an opposing force, is Lucifer, who is infecting us with these issues, but in which case that means that he's affecting creation here on the planet. And the other option is you go to the Cathar view, and you have the good God and the evil God. And the evil God is hell-bent on spreading darkness into the children of God, and hell-bent on bringing the evil into this world. Either way, both stories, both concepts can be avoided and escaped simply by allowing humans to get light and disciplined. I cannot believe that a 30 or 40 day water fast will not transform every human being on this planet. But most are just too scared. They're too afraid. They aren't willing to give their all. You know, I do not do my own will, Jesus said. I seek the will of the one who sent me. I do the will of the one who sent me. Seek the will of the Father. The will of the one who sent you means that you don't have any anticipation for the future of your life. And I know, because I've been there. You actually only want to do the will of God. And if you find a space in your heart where your heart has no desire, and you make it clean, and you say, I only want your desire in my heart, you will see this. But most people will never do it, because they are caught up in the idea of who they are. They're caught up in the ego. And they tickle the idea of seeking God, but very rarely do they go ahead first and seek God. Maybe they attend church on Sunday, but they still go ahead and have all of these problems holding them back from their true communion with God during the week, all of the lack of discipline, etc. And when you really give yourself over and you get into that high frequency, God meets you there every single time. You know, every time God will meet you there. And as Jacob said, he has saw God face to face. He called that place Peniel. You will meet God in your higher vibrations of who you are, definitely. And strangely, it is said that the seat of the soul is the pineal gland. And Jacob said, I've seen God face to face, call that place Peniel. He was speaking in a way where you vibrate in such a sense that you commune with the Father directly. You understand right now God is here with you. Many people don't have that. They have an idea, maybe he is, maybe not. They don't know God's there. They like to believe it. So, no matter what story it is, it would seem that elevating your frequency, in my experience, through fasting and prayer, including the teachings of Jesus Christ, he didn't say if, he said when you fast. You can't be a Christian if you don't fast. End of story. There's no ifs or buts. You cannot be a Christian if you're not fasting. Doesn't have to be complete water fasting like I've done, etc. But I will say I believe that's the greatest benefit. But it can be a reduction in calories. You'll see my weight fluctuate often in my life because of this. Because I need to clean myself with this. I need to raise up my frequency. And when you do that, you do commune with the good loving God. And when you get there, you can't begin to understand so much the attributes of the lower God. But you can remember your own lower vibratory state in the body has a potential for wrongdoing. I've done a lot of wrong in my past, and now I know to discipline myself and keep myself in the space of doing the right, the fruits of the Spirit versus the flesh. If we can all learn to teach our children that when they become of age where it's safe to do so, because you're not safe as a child to fast for prolonged periods, to start fasting, to raise their vibration, to pursue the highest form of religion which dismantles your ego in a moment, to serve the widows and the orphans, in other words, to help the needy. When you see people desperately in need, you forget yourself. You just do. If you're a decent person, you just forget yourself and you just want to help them. And your ego is just dismantled. There's no need for meditation, anything. It's just gone because you know this thing's in my way of helping this human being here. When you understand that, I believe at that point you can start to make your own discernment. Is it that the reality we are in is a mixture of a God who knows only good and a God who knows only suffering? Is it that the God that we had created a powerful being who is here corrupting the goodness that he intended? But in which case that means that we have to accept Lucifer's influence in creation Because otherwise, why is Mother Nature so evil? Why is it so absolutely brutal? You can only then say that the God who created this has capacity for both good and evil. And it's a very hard pill for people to swallow, that we have capacity for both inside of us. And we say that the God who created this has the same capacity, but then why does the God that I know brought me here, the God that I love, the God that loves the children that we care for and has worked countless, endless miracles around us to make this happen, and still is every single day. I'm going to share some of the miracles with you soon that's happened. Why is that God always trying to end and eradicate suffering? And why did that God create a reality where, prior to our own ingenuity, God-given ingenuity and intelligence and the ability to develop and to build and to have roads and to have sewerage systems, etc., why was life as a hunter-gatherer just almost unbearable and deeply full of suffering, like it is for many hunter-gatherers here, where they have some beautiful aspects, like they don't have a word for sharing, because sharing just comes naturally. There's no reason to have a word for it. It's just a typical behaviour. Why would there be? But they also have most of their children dying before the age of 4, because infant mortality is so high, and dying in suffering, horrible ways. Is it that God gave us this ingenuity to escape the burden of the negative God who was involved in this? Is it that Lucifer wanted us to suffer? Is it that we are being deceived about our history and we didn't come from hunter-gatherers? We have so many different factors, but the evidence shows with our eyes that we did come from a hunter-gatherer background, which means that at some point in this reality we were subject to the laws of the beasts as well, which means we were being torn apart by animals, which means that we were also doing it to others as well, and even to ourselves. And that there is where you have the problem, and people have the problem, because where does that loving God who doesn't want to see suffering today come in at that point in creation, in that point of our human journey? And thus, if you lean to the Cathar idea, which lines up with Jesus, he said the prince of this world is Satan, and the Nag Hammadi, it speaks of the Archon who created this reality and is an amnesic God. If you look at all of these things, then what Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So it's almost like he's leaning towards the idea God did create this place, despite the Bible is saying that he did breathe life into it. But Jesus was a new testament, he was a new covenant, and he said, the God of this world is Satan. And he said that his kingdom is not of this world. And when you look at the creation, the loving, caring nature of Jesus is not inside the development of creation here. It's just not there, because there's so much suffering and pain and angst. So the Cathar idea that there's a loving God who doesn't know that is quite a beautiful idea. The idea that there's an evil God mixing with them in this reality together is also quite a beautiful idea. And it just somehow sits easier with people, I think, once they hear it. Because then the God that we all love and care for, who gives us love and asks us to eradicate the suffering of one another, seems to start to make more sense, because he wasn't behind that aspect of creation that makes us suffer. Or Lucifer has so much power that he has influenced creation down here, is the other option. But either way, it's up to us to raise our vibration. It's up to us to elevate our frequency. And in doing so, it's then up to us to start bringing the light of Christ into this world, and bring it as a massive way, and understand that it's up to us and our free will to do that. If we choose not to fast and because it's too tough, so be it. If you choose to watch the TV instead, so be it. But I'll tell you now, fasting changed my life, made me the man I am today, and allowed me to do all of the good things that I have managed to do with my life only by, thankfully, God's push on my back and his support at my front. Free will. The same free will that allows a man to attack a woman. The same free will that allows for these persons that he spoke of in Auschwitz, I think he said, to execute these innocent people. That free will is coming off the back of a primitive human being. And there are a lot of human animals on this planet dressed as civilized human beings, but they're not. There are human animals and human beings. The Torah spoke of this as well, and I absolutely agree with it because I see it here. I have these beautiful, loving people caring for our special needs children. And then out there, in walking distance to where I am, undoubtedly, there are men who sacrifice those children and have no empathy or love for them as they do it, believing they get rewards from the dark spirits when they do. There's human animals and human beings. We must, if we can understand that there's a potential of how they came about from the two means I've spoken about, which are written in scriptures, then I think it comes to a point where you take responsibility to go to war with it. And that's what I've been doing most of my recent decade of my life, as I went to war with it. I've took my wounds, I've gotten sick, so on and so forth. I've been in danger. I had doctors tell me I'd been poisoned, all of these different things. But look at the good that came into the world, and for all I may have suffered some, the amount of suffering that my presence in doing that with God has eradicated far exceeds the suffering I received. Which means if it's about a balance of energy, I've done my duty. I've planted trees I might not sit under the shade of. But what's the joy in only planting things you sit under the shade of? What's the joy in leaving this world not knowing that you've left an impact that will keep going? That you've taught people around you what it means to love. That you've shown children such love. That you've taken boys who were once on the street, were rapists. Boys who said they were had murdered people. And you have turned them around and you have brought them to be beautiful young men who then have concerns for the other children like them and minister to them and try to bring them home to the centre to give them a better life too. I think it's been worth the exchange, in all honesty. Because when I really think about it, I'm grateful for all the lives that any suffering I took from the enemy has been put upon me. I'm grateful for all those lives. So, have I cried out at times and said, where's God when I'm sick? Of course I have. I'm human. We often walk by sight and not by faith. But he's always came. Always. And I'm still standing. And I know, no matter what, there is a good loving God, and that good loving God is deeply opposed to any harm to one another. And the reason that the harm is continuing to go on is God can only operate in the hands and feet of people, as can Satan. And the majority of people are not working for Satan or working for God. They're just paralyzed in the middle, in a prison of their own making, a prison of the chemical reactions of their body to food, substances, TV, and so on and so forth. But when Satan starts to attack you, all he's doing is putting a big mark on your back and saying, this is one of God's, and I don't like him. And that tells you that you're doing the right thing. But if you are not willing to go towards God, to be able to be a vessel for him, then how will you ever be opposing the evil that you're frustrated at? Using your free will, you can become God's child. You can be the person that God whispers to and says, turn that corner, and you are the one who is there to stop the evil happening to another human being. I've done it, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. I've got children as young as 3 in our care who were raped before they came to us. I've got women who were traumatized beyond comprehension, children who were beaten and attacked with machetes. And right now, they never think about it. But had they been left to where they were, they would have just become a dark, broken soul. But it took someone to hear God and walk round the corner and pick them up and bring them to safety. And the longer we toy with the idea if God is there or not, the longer we don't obey every spiritual leader's command and fast and seek God, seek God, seek God, not with your carnal mind, with your whole being, the longer God does not have hands and feet here to do the will of the Father, the longer he doesn't have a vessel for his will to express, the longer more darkness can occur to the poor souls that it occurs to. And not only that, the longer the darkness can exist inside the vehicle of people who actually aren't dark at all, because I've watched, as I mentioned, the street boys, I've watched them go from dark to light. So that's why If we had more people truly seeking God with all they have, there would be more people to call on to stop the evil events before they happen. You have millions of people all around places where murders happen, places where rapes happen. I am telling you that we can hear God and be guided by God. It's just most of them are on their phone, watching the TV. They're not praying, they're not fasting, they're not staying in a constant state of presentness with God. And so God has no vessel to say, go around that corner, please. Please, there's someone in trouble. It's not there. Because we've all disabled ourselves. And we've disabled ourselves trying to seek safety inside the confines of our own technology, instead of finding safety, the true safety, that eradicates all feelings of fear. The safety of nestling ourselves in the palm of God's loving hand and saying, make me a channel of your peace, as the great St. Francis of Assisi said. God bless, guys.